Good evening and welcome to episode 73 of the Jacksonian. I'm yours truly, Jackson Johnson. And 72 episodes later, the man, the legend himself that this show all started with, the one and only himself, from the voice of college football on USC Primetime Live, TrojansWire, and College Wire himself, Matt Zemek, as we go over quite a lot on the USC Trojans, what's going on with Lincoln Riley, the future of Notre Dame USC, and the college football coaches that should be in the Hall of Fame. And let me tell you something, folks, it's going to be a wild ride. How you doing today, good buddy?
Doing great. So I returned to the Jacksonian. What do they say about tennis and golf major champions? You win one, it's kind of lucky. You win two, you do it a second time, that's when you know it's for real. So second appearance on the Jacksonian, that's a big deal for me. And I don't know if it is for you, but I know it is for me.
Well, it is for me, that's for sure. Because it's like that's what it all started with, and before we know it, it's going to be a third appearance, fourth, fifth, sixth, so on and so forth.
I am proud to have been a trailblazer on the Jacksonian.
Well, we appreciate it, man, and I am so glad you have been a trailblazer on this show. And, for those who don't know about you, try to tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been doing sports writing pretty much the whole 21st century. I started writing at College Football News in 2001, was there for over a decade. A lot of people who watch this show might be aware of, Southern college football fans, Barrett Sallee, who, worked at CBS Sports. He now does the Atlanta Braves pregame show, just, great sports journalist and commentator. He was on the staff with me at College Football News about 15 years ago, back in the day. Rich Sermonello, you also might remember him from CFN, and of course Pete Fiutak, the founder and editor-in-chief. So cut my teeth at College Football News for about 12 years, from 2001 to 2013. Some great times, and that's where I learned how to follow college football in depth. Just had some great people who have gone on to do some really special things in the sports journalism industry. And then I went to a place called the Student Section, and that was under Comeback Media, which is kind of the offshoot of Awful Announcing. Had a few years there from 2014 to 2016 covering college sports. Would write some guest articles for Awful Announcing for a few years. In 2017, some of you might remember FanRag Sports. It was a startup venture. The owners threw around money like a drunken sailor. So for a year, I had a really nice financial setup, but we all wondered, is this going to last? Is this really going to last? But that 1 year, 2017, 2018, was colleagues with John Rothstein, college basketball insider of CBS Sports. John Heyman, who's the MLB insider, writes for the New York papers. He was part of FanRag Sports. That was an amazing year. So 2017, 2018 had a lot of fun, but unfortunately, just the budgetary setup, it was not sustainable. But had met some great people at FanRag Sports. And then the last several years, 2019 to today, worked for the College Wire network at USA Today. Did a year at Badgers Wire as kind of a fill-in, but then when the USC TrojansWire website came open, they needed an editor. I stepped in 2020, so I've been doing that the past 5 years. I also am handling the UCLA Wire site. Now, I'm a USC guy. Don't get it twisted. I'm a Trojan. My father went to USC in the 1960s. So, fight on, okay? But I take care of the UCLA site and try and provide robust coverage that UCLA fans will enjoy. Look, even a Trojan needs a paycheck, right? So that UCLA Wire editor job fattens my wallet a little bit, and I'm happy to do that, and I'm going to do the best job I can at UCLA Wire. But I've been with Mark Rogers and the voice of college football for 4 years. When Lincoln Riley got hired, November 28, 2021, that Sunday, Mark and I were on the air discussing that bombshell development. So, 5 years at TrojansWire, 4 years with the USC channel, at the Voice of College Football. Really excited about that, and want everybody to know that we're starting a written website at the Voice of College Football. It's very simple, vocfb.com. So I am editing that site. I help post the graphics and the pictures for stories that get up, and hey, just Jackson, just get that Alabama logo on there briefly. So there's the link to Jackson Johnson's Alabama Crimson Tide live show with Coach Johnny Burks. So you can just get the summaries of these episodes, but we also link to the actual YouTube broadcast. We're trying to help the YouTube and Google algorithms, but there's Jackson's most recent broadcast here at the Voice of College Football. So Jackson, that's kind of tracing the story from CFN in 2001 to other involvements, a decade ago, and then now the past several years, it's been the TrojansWire network. And I also am a writer for the site TrojansWire. That's national stuff that's not covered by team-specific sites such as TrojansWire and UCLA Wire. If they don't fall into one of the, there are 28 team sites. So if they're not part of the 28 teams, we cover that at TrojansWire. So we're covering the College World Series. We're covering, the latest basketball transfer portal items and some college football playoff stuff as well. So I contribute there with a staff of talented writers as well. So that pretty much covers it, Jackson. That's been my career in sports content, sports journalism. I would say it's more content. I'm not carrying a notepad and I'm not flying to locations. So I don't really consider myself a reporter. I'm more of a content provider and an editor, but really excited for what I'm doing at the TrojansWire network and now for the written website here at the Voice of College Football.
There we go. Tell your friends, family, and cashiers at Publish about the magic that Matt Zemek is creating behind the scenes on College Sports Wire, USC Wire, UCLA Wire, Voice College Football, and USC at the Voice College Football, including USC Primetime Live Wednesday nights with Ethan Inman. Well, I can tell you this, the USC Trojans, so far it's looking a little disappointing with Lincoln Riley. Cause I hope it's not Jimbo Fisher vibes for his sake, because it's the eyes say all, the eyes tell it all. It's looking like it. Yay, we got Lincoln. No, a bid buyout if he's getting fired, which that's not happening after this season. Relax, no firings. But
well, let's just talk about that. Let's just talk about that for a moment. Some people might say, "Hey, isn't Lincoln Riley on the hot seat this season after two really horrible seasons in 2023, 2024?" The reason he's not, Jackson, and I think a lot of your listeners here at the Jacksonian would be just need to know this, just to make it really clear. The last two seasons have been bad. Why would Lincoln Riley not be on the hot seat? It's because that 2026 recruiting class is coming in, number one ranked recruiting class in the country, and USC was just stumbling in the dark, just stepping on a rake, slipping on a banana peel, whatever metaphor image you want to use, because it didn't have its NIL house in order. Like USC, right? Private school, Southern California, Los Angeles market. Why was Oregon kicking USC's butt in the NIL space? And it's not just that Phil Knight has a bunch of money. Oregon was organized and USC was not. And we've been wondering at USC, why is the NIL house not in order? It was not a question of money. It was a question of organization, of structure. So as we all know now, Chad Bowden gets hired as general manager from Notre Dame. USC finally hires a proper general manager. USC was just behind the times, finally hired the right guy, someone to impose an administrative structure on the program. This is not Lincoln Riley's doing, right? This was Jen Cohen, the athletic director, and then Chad Bowden coming in, providing that NIL structure. Again, it wasn't a question of money. It was the structure. So, all the things that Lincoln Riley had not done as a recruiter, they instantly started happening right after Chad Bowden gets hired. So like it's a 2 + 2 = 4 thing, and it's immediate causation, right? Chad Bowden comes in, click, click. Like everything just starts happening the way we expect it to at USC, the way it did happen under Pete Carroll. Chad Bowden is like the before and after. Not saying he's Jesus, but he has resurrected USC recruiting for sure. And so USC finally gets its NIL house in order. That just changes everything. So because Lincoln Riley's finally getting Whole Foods level groceries instead of 7-Eleven junk food, because the recruits are finally coming in, because USC is finally putting a fence around Southern California and keeping those elite recruits home, and is besting Oregon and Dan Lanning on the trail, they're not going to boot Lincoln Riley after this season. They are going to give him the 2026 season with those elite high-end recruits. That's why there's no hot seat. Like, it would be awful, no question about it, if USC goes 6-6, 7-5 this season. But there's just been so much invested in the program, and the recruiting and the talent acquisition has become so transformed. It's a complete 180 from what existed a year ago. They're just not going to fire Lincoln Riley with the large buyout that you mentioned before the 2026 season. But of course, if he stumbles in 2026, after stumbling in 2025, different conversation. But he's going to get 2026. There's no question about it now that USC has got its structural house in order.
There we go. And I noticed that the non-FBS opponent streak continues, because like it looked like it was going to end in 2025, but Missouri State is in their first season of the Conference USA, and it starts with USC on week 1.
That's kind of like getting off on a technicality, right, Jackson? I mean, like in any previous year, that would break the no FCS streak. But, so technically USC still stays on the right side of the law. But and we all know this, Jackson, this is obviously another big story that, Lincoln Riley has, he's a very cautious person. And he's not going to be supremely ambitious unless he knows he's the big dog in the room. And right now, USC is not the big dog in the room. So Lincoln Riley wants the softer non-conference schedule. This is why, Ole Miss was originally on this schedule, but Lincoln Riley then said, no, thanks. He just is cautious that way. And of course, this leads us to the other really big topic at USC in the offseason. Is the Notre Dame series going to survive? And of course, next year is the 100th anniversary of that series. And, to see that series die right after the 100th anniversary, that would be a real shame. Because USC Notre Dame is college football. It is college football tradition. It is college football history. I mean, this is the best of college football. USC Notre Dame has given us, beyond the national championships and the Heisman trophies, it's just given us so many indelible moments. Like the mountaintop moments in college football history, so many of them come from USC Notre Dame. Younger fans, it's October 15, 2005, the Bush push, the 4th and 9. But for older fans like 60 years old and older, it's Anthony Davis, and then the kickoff return in 1974, and USC scoring the 55 straight points after being down 24-0.
Oh yeah, Woody Hayes was calling that game with Keith Jackson in 1970.
That's right. Yes, that would be like an elite guest coach alongside Keith Jackson, and ESPN has made 30 for 30s on college football. One of the 30-30s that simply has to be made, and it's really kind of amazing, this 30 for 30 has not been made yet, Jackson, and everyone watching here on the Jacksonian. Come on, folks. How has there not been a documentary made on Eric Arthur and John McKay? Everyone talks about Woody versus Bo, the 10-year war, Ohio State, Michigan, 1969 through 1978. Well, what about that other 10-year war, right? from 1964 through 1974. So actually an 11-year war. But 1964 through 1974, USC Notre Dame, one of those two teams was playing for the national championship in nearly all of those games. Notre Dame won multiple national titles in that 11-year period. USC won several national titles in that same period. How come no one has done an Era versus McKay documentary on those 11 seasons, 1964 to 74? That's part of college football's golden age. So to rip up this rivalry, you're ripping up the heart of college football. And so I really hope USC comes to its senses.
I mean, because honestly, it would feel like how Alabama Auburn felt when they didn't play 1908 from 1947, when Texas A&M didn't play from 2012 to 2023. Kansas, Missouri not playing each other from 2012 to 2024. It's nuts. It's completely nuts.
It is nuts. Now, Texas, where football is religion, the idea that the Aggies and Longhorns don't play, that strikes really deep. Now, Kansas, Missouri, that's kind of more of a local feud, right? But you also mentioned the Iron Bowl, the Iron Bowl not being played. The Iron Bowl, the most passionate rivalry, arguably in sports, not just college football. Army Navy's really passionate, but there's also kind of an honor, tradition, and kind of a respect. Auburn, Alabama, the Iron Bowl, that is the nastiest rivalry, I think, on the planet. Barcelona, Real Madrid, Red Sox, Yankees. Do they have as much venom as Auburn, Alabama? I don't think so.
No.
So USC, Notre Dame, just because these programs are at the top of the pyramid in terms of college football tradition, history, excellence. Man, you take that away, you take away a large part of what makes college football so special. And so, and this is the painful thing, Jackson. It's that, the Big Ten getting 4 automatic bids, which also means the SEC getting 4 automatic bids. It's not as though one conference is going to get more than the other. Most people would generally say that's bad for college football, right? 4 automatic bids, you can finish 4th in the SEC, or you win that. The SEC might do a 3 versus 6 and a 4 versus 5 play-in game in early December. An idea I actually like, but the idea that a 4 versus 5 game gives you an automatic berth, most fans are not going to like that. I'm not going to like that. And so the painful thing that I'm referring to, Jackson, is simply that if that happens, if that is the playoff plan for 2026 and beyond, which would not be good for college football, the irony is that was what would probably save the USC Notre Dame series, right? Because if USC is guaranteed to have a playoff spot, or at least a playoff chance if it finishes 4th in the Big Ten with 4 automatic bids, that would presumably relieve the pressure on USC to play the Notre Dame game without, fearing that it's going to knock the Trojans out of the playoff. So what's going to be bad for college football on a broader level would be good for college football strictly in terms of saving USC Notre Dame. It shouldn't have to come to this, though, right? It shouldn't be that we need this bad thing to happen to save USC Notre Dame, but that might be what we're looking at. That's the really uncomfortable reality of that particular situation.
Well, and here's a few other 30 for 30 ideas for rivalries that haven't been played on an annual basis as well. Penn State, Pittsburgh, West Virginia, Florida, Miami.
Totally. Penn State, Pitt, I know you're a college football historian, and any other people who are college football historians, man, in the late 1970s and the early 1980s, there were few games in the nation that mattered more on an annual basis than Penn State versus Pitt. You had Joe Paterno against Jackie Sherrill, the elite teams on both sides of that game. At least one of the two, if not both, had national championship aspirations when that game was played. So for several years, about 45 years ago, that was you had to circle that game before every season. So great call with Penn State Pitt.
There we go. I mean, like it's a shame that it's only been 8 times since Pitt and State has joined the Big Ten that those two schools have played one another. That is a crying shame. But
It
on
is
the
a crying
bright
shame.
side,
And there's so many of these crying shames, which is its own crying shame.
right? It's insane.
Absolutely.
Oh man, it's like, but hey, there's some article ideas. 30 for 30s for each of these rivalries. Maybe that'll get them to come back.
The other,
'Cause like-
just a brief tangent. While we're on the subject of 30 for 30s, how come there hasn't been a Steve Spurrier, Bobby Bowden 30 for 30?
Oh, that would be.
How
awesome.
have you not done that yet, ESPN?
Oh man, like ESPN is just too focused on dumping on MLB. Like, oh my god.
Well, you know, here's what really irks me about ESPN 30 for 30 not having a Spurrier Bowden episode yet, all these years later. ESPN gave the U, Miami, 2 different documentaries. Like, it wasn't enough to have the U, they did a U part 2. And here you have Spurrier and Bowden not even doing one. I mean, how pathetic is that? How pathetic is that?
It's pretty pathetic.
How absolutely Bush League, bottom of the barrel is that?
It is 1000% Bush League. It's Bush League right there. But
Yep, and I obviously struck a chord too. Like logical college football diehards such as yourself. We can all see the absolute idiocy of that.
ugh, like ESPN's not really talking to any of the people involved in college football. They're just talking to some dude in a cigar and like a 3-piece suit, like some dude that looks like Jack Lemmon from Glenn Ross. That's who they're talking to, not to the college football fan.
Yeah, I mean, look, Jackson, you put 100 people in a room and you ask them this question: does ESPN care about the welfare and the health of college football as a sport? Hard to imagine a majority of the 100 people saying yes.
No.
I don't know if it would be 90-10. I don't know if it would be 70-30. I don't know if it would be 58-42. But I know that you put 100 people in a room, and if they're not from Bristol, then most of them are going to say ESPN does not care about the health of the sport of college football.
No, they most certainly don't. But we do. We care about the sport of college football.
Darn right.
But we get to that November. I got to be honest, USC Northwestern. That I'm still just trying to let that sink in as a conference game. It's like, oh yeah, that was an old Rose Bowl matchup in the '90s.
Keyshawn Johnson running wild, against Gary Barnett. The thing to note about that game, just while we're talking about it, you know, USC hosted Rutgers on a Friday night a year ago, but that was during Game 1 of the World Series. And I wonder what happened in Game 1 of the World Series. Just your normal grand slam walk-off, bottom of the ninth, Freddie Freeman. So Friday, November 7th, that's not going to go up against the World Series. So Angelinos won't need to go to Dodger Stadium. They can just go to this game. So it's good that there's no conflict with a potential Dodger World Series.
There we go. So that's going to be fun to watch. I mean, hey, it's kind of like a sleepover. You get to stay up late watching late night games on Friday night. USC Iowa looks pretty good. Thank goodness USC's not having to go to Kinnick Stadium, because Kinnick Stadium is always scary for everybody. Oregon and UCLA. Ooh, what a way to end that.
Yeah, well, you know, UCLA overachieved under Deshaun Foster last season, and of course now this game is like the Polynesian quarterback bowl. You know, you have Iamaleava against Maiava. So who's going to win that one between UCLA and USC? That's going to be like the quarterback matchup, and UCLA USC just became really interesting. Anyway, I see that you've adjusted the screen to pull up the full schedule. So really, folks, let's just go down the line. So Missouri State, Georgia Southern, Clay Helton. That game just might get a little interesting just because of all the Clay Helton pieces that are going to be written in the Los Angeles Times and other local media outlets that week. But obviously, it's not a game where USC is going to be threatened. The Purdue game doesn't figure to be close, but there's something that needs to be said about this Purdue game. USC flies to the middle of Indiana, West Lafayette, in the middle of September. Well, guess what happens later in the season? USC flies to the middle of Indiana to South Bend to play Notre Dame. Now, this is dumb. And this is where, when USC joined the Big Ten and when USC was negotiating with the Big Ten to join the conference several years ago, there should have been a conversation about, hey, we have to go to Notre Dame every other year in the middle of October. We need to be playing Purdue or Indiana, whichever team's part of the schedule rotation. When we have to play a road game in West Lafayette or Bloomington, we should be playing Indiana or Purdue either the week before or the week after, right? So that you just stay in the middle of Indiana for 2 weeks. So that means 2 plane flights instead of 4, right?
Yeah.
It's just the most obvious thing. Like in baseball, I live in Phoenix. The Arizona Diamondbacks, they had to fly to New York to play the Mets in April. Then a month later, they had to fly to New York to play the Yankees in early May. Like, this is the same thing. This is the same dumb, stupid, idiotic thing. Why aren't you just playing Purdue and Notre Dame in consecutive weeks? It's just the dumbest thing in the world, and USC needed to demand more from the Big Ten, and the Big Ten couldn't deliver. Like, this is part of why USC is wobbling on the Notre Dame series, is because, the logistics of the Big Ten. The Big Ten is not doing everything it can. If the Big Ten was doing everything it can, it would have scheduled Purdue and Notre Dame in consecutive weeks. So that's the important note about that Purdue game. But again, on the field, it shouldn't be close.
Purdue, though.
So you have Jonathan Smith, former Oregon State coach. So that is an X and O battle. Jonathan Smith, he could outsmart Lincoln Riley, and that game could get a little tricky for USC. So I wouldn't count that one as a lock. I'd say it's a game USC is supposed to win, but it's not a lock. It might not be a walk in the park. At Illinois, when you look at what Brett Bielema has been doing with the Illini, that's certainly not a piece of cake. And of course, USC did not handle Big Ten road trips very well at all last season. So the Trojans are going to have to prove that they can be tougher, that they can be stronger. This is why they fired strength coach Benny Wiley, who was with Lincoln Riley since the Oklahoma days. They replaced him with Trumaine Carroll. So there is a Coach Carroll on this USC staff. His first name, though, is Trumaine, and he comes from Kansas State. It's going to be interesting to see how the USC strength and conditioning program goes this year. You can't really make far-reaching verdicts on that strength program because, he got hired in late April, so that doesn't give him a lot of time. Trumaine Carroll really was being hired for 2026 and that number 1 recruiting class, which was brought in. But nevertheless, how strong, how durable is this USC team going to be? That's going to be a really interesting point of conversation. And then we get to the big ones in the middle of the season, Michigan, Notre Dame. And so really, Jackson and everyone watching here on the Jacksonian, this is the big picture about USC's schedule. We've already talked about Northwestern a little bit, talked about UCLA a little bit. You see that Oregon game in late November as well. Here's basically what it comes down to for USC. Michigan, Notre Dame, Oregon, all on the road. It's going to be tough to win any of those 3 games this season. USC will have a good season if it wins all the other games on the schedule. That is, with this team, with this roster, which, is not a complete roster. They don't have elite recruits the way the 2026 class does. And they haven't gotten all of the portal reinforcements that they've needed. They've gotten some pieces, but they don't have the depth of really, an elite juggernaut type program. If USC can just basically win the 9 games it is generally expected to win, it can go 0-3 against Michigan, Notre Dame, and Oregon and still feel, hey, we've made progress because we're winning the games we're supposed to. Last year, USC did not win the games it was supposed to win. Didn't win at Minnesota. didn't win at Washington, didn't win at Maryland, let a lot of winnable games slip away. So basically the task for USC this year, I mean, obviously everyone wants to go 10-2, everyone wants to be in the playoff, and it would be great if that happened. And it's not as though USC doesn't have a chance against Michigan. The Michigan game, by the way, is at home. I misspoke. That's not a road game. That game's at home. So USC might have a puncher's chance against Michigan, but at Notre Dame and at Oregon, those are going to be really tough. And just all in all, 9-3 seems to be the reasonable goal. And USC fans would love to be better than that, but 9-3 is like the reasonable goal because if USC goes 9-3. That will tell everyone, okay, we're not letting the games we're supposed to win slip through our fingers. So the program is maturing, the program is approaching the higher standard, and that's the perfect, well, not the perfect, but it's a good, solid on-ramp to 2026 where you get the much higher caliber of athlete with that top-ranked recruiting class, and everyone could enter 2026 feeling, okay, we're building back to the standard. We're building back to Pete Carroll. We're building back to the way things should be at USC. So if USC goes 9-3, there will be a sense of, okay, everything's back on track. It's not exactly where we want to be, but it's going in the right direction. It's being repaired. It's being restored. That's a process. If USC is able to go 10-2, whoa, now that would say, all right, we're really on schedule. Like we can feel really confident about where this thing is going. And if USC is 8-4, there will be, some degree of hesitation, some degree of uncertainty, but they'll still say, you know what, better than 2024. Now we get the 2026 recruiting class. All of this can still work. And it would be okay. Wouldn't be good, but it would be okay. Like it would be avoiding the disaster. And the disaster would be 7-5 or anything worse. Then Lincoln Riley would get that next season, as we've discussed. He wouldn't be fired, but there would be a lot of grumbling, a lot of quote unquote noise in the system, right? A lot of chatter, a lot of dissatisfaction among the donors, the boosters, and the NIL collectives, etc. So it's really important for USC to avoid being 7-5 or worse this season. The reasonable goal is 9-3, and if you win the 9 games you're supposed to, if you can then just get one of Michigan, Notre Dame, Oregon, then you're 10-2, and then you're probably in the playoff.
There we go. I mean, that'll be fun to see USC in the playoffs, especially with a 10-2 record. Like it'll be interesting to see what happens going into 2025. I hope for their sake that they're not bragging about like, oh, we won in the Las Vegas Bowl. That is not something you should be bragging about at USC. You should not be bragging about that. That is not something you should be flexing. You should be like, okay, we won that bowl game. We're going to use that as momentum for next season.
Nothing more, nothing less. Absolutely. And USC did not play a great game. Texas A&M had to commit its fair share of mistakes late in that one. So, if USC had won that game 35-3, all right, maybe you do a little bit of chirping, but USC did not play a good game in the Vegas Bowl. USC fans were calling for Maiyava's head in the third quarter of that game. He made so many bad decisions before regrouping late. So, yeah, it's not as though USC played like an elite team in that game to begin with. Yeah, no one should be chirping about that one. So there's a lot to prove this year.
Agreed. Well, and, back to that topic of Lincoln Riley for a sec. So if USC, if it is official that the Notre Dame series is out for after 2026, and we see USC making it to the playoffs for 2027 and beyond, then it helps Lincoln Riley and Jen Cohen. But if they're still having an 8-4 season and it's, we don't have the Notre Dame series, that was never the problem to begin with. It's not just going to be Lincoln Riley. It's Jen Cohen's butt on the line as well if that happens.
No question. Like Jen Cohen has taken a hard line in negotiations with Notre Dame on this. Now, of course, we're waiting to see what the playoff format is going to be. As we talked about earlier, if the Big Ten gets 4 automatic bids, USC probably drops, the hard line stance on Notre Dame and probably will live with the rivalry, into the foreseeable future. So, but I mean, we need to see if that happens. We need to see if the Big Ten and the SEC are able to push that through. And I just reiterate, like, I would not like 4 automatic bids for the Big Ten and the SEC. I would not like that at all. But just in terms of explaining the politics of this, that would be something which would save the USC Notre Dame series most likely. So you have to take one bad thing to get one good thing. It's not really a fun place to be.
Somebody's getting screwed over. It's like the late comedian George Carlin said, it's a big club and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club. That was from the 2005 special. I forget the name of it, but it'll come back to me.
He was a brilliant man, and he was ahead of his time in many ways.
Man, I think the playoff committee needs to watch him. That's for sure.
I think everyone needs to watch him for sure. Just, while we're talking about USC Notre Dame, I mean, obviously we need to, hope that the series gets saved and that USC backs off its hardline stance. But got to get this point on the record here on the Jacksonian, and that is that in that 2026 game, the 100th anniversary, need to do it up right. And what that means is we need to see double home uniforms. Need to see USC wearing the crimson jerseys. Need to see Notre Dame wearing green. Need to see like a green end zone at one end of the field. Need to see a cardinal and gold end zone at the other end of the field. Like put a shamrock and put a Trojan helmet together. Got to do it up right for the 100th
Why do the
rivalry of USC Notre Dame.
Why do the rivalry games not do what USC UCLA does? Like, I know, like
Seriously.
Yeah, I mean it's insane. Like, I know, like Alabama, Tennessee did the home uniforms until like 1967. That was like the last time that happened. Alabama, Auburn did that until 1963, but starting with 64, it was home uniforms, away uniforms. I want to see all the rivalry games do this. Like come on.
Yeah. Because here's the thing. For an official, the only problem is if the colors of the two teams are the same. But if the colors of the two teams are different, it is not a problem. You do not need to worry about this. So, like, Alabama against, let's say, Georgia. Okay, you can't do double home uniforms because they both wear red. All right, we get that. But yeah, Alabama, Tennessee, red, orange. Like as an official, you're not going to be confused by which player. So yeah, really, seriously, honestly, this should not be hard. We should be doing double home uniforms for every rivalry game where there isn't a color similarity. Pretty easy.
Oh man. Like that would be so awesome if we can get everybody in college football on board with this. But I'll tell you, it may not be today, tomorrow, next week, but I think it can be done within a few years.
Yeah, like Penn State, Ohio State, right? Like you get that dark Penn State blue against that Ohio State scarlet. Like, come on, who says no? Who says no?
I know, right? It's like, it would be awesome. Ohio State, Michigan, red and blue. Guess one another. Michigan going all blue. Ohio State going all red.
Like, let's give people more awesome things. And like Jackson, especially at a time when so many people feel that the soul of college football is dying because of NIL, because of the transfer portal, because of the dollars. This is the perfect way to kind of build back a sense of, hey, there's still a lot that's really special about this sport. So give them some eye candy, right? Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. It's such a small thing to do. It's easy. Like, you're not spending millions of dollars. You're just saying, hey, wear your home uniform as a road team. Like, it is not hard. And yet right? And yet this sport sits on its rear end. So Jackson, we in this conversation, we've touched on so many really dumb things that are going on in college football, whether it's ESPN 30 for 30 or not wearing double home uniforms, USC being, peeing its pants about Notre Dame when it shouldn't be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So many dumb things. And so now we arrive at the College Football Hall of Fame. And so, oh God. All right. First off, it's a good thing that Mike Leach is going to get into the College Football Hall of Fame because he deserves to. He's an innovator. He won at Texas Tech. He won at Washington State. I mean, he's won at places where it's hard to win. Of course, the Pirate deserves to be in the College Football Hall of Fame. But the rule change or the policy change that got Mike Leach in or is going to get Mike Leach in, they just changed the winning percentage criteria by 0.5%. Instead of being 600, you can get in at 0.595. So we're just going to change it 0.5%. We're not going to just do away with that rule.
Is this guy Howard Schnellenberger not in the Hall of Fame? Bro literally built Miami football, Louisville football, and Florida Atlantic
from nothing. All three from nothing. Exactly. And so because Schnellenberger had to build 3 programs basically from rock bottom, from the dust, from absolute ground zero, in your first 3-4 years of a total rebuild, you're not going to win games. In fact, you're going to lose a lot of games. So Howard Schnellenberger's win percentage isn't even close to 600. It's not that 0.595. So he's going to remain locked out of the Hall of Fame, which is an absolute joke. Howard Schnellenberger is a giant, and you can't write the story of college football without Miami versus Florida State in the 1980s and on into the early 90s. That is, 15 to 20 of the most important years in the sport's history. Miami and Florida State always being there in the hunt for the national title. If Miami did not exist, Bobby Bowden would have 7-8 national championships, and we would talk about him, not Nick Saban, as the greatest coach ever. So that is Howard Schnellenberger's legacy right there. And yet, because of a stupid, arbitrary bean counting rule, you don't let Howard Schnellenberger in the Hall of Fame. And so here's the other one. And this is a little bit more personal to me because I'm, of course, a blogger at USC. Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll is not eligible. Forget about not being in the Hall of Fame. He is not eligible for the College Football Hall of Fame under the current set of policies. Because, again, this is an arbitrary bean counting rule. You have to have coached for 10 seasons to be eligible. Well, Pete Carroll's just under 10 seasons, so they're just going to lock him out, despite the fact that, he had an absolute freaking dynasty at USC, 34-game win streak, 6 straight Pac-10 championships, all those Rose Bowls, the back-to-back national championship game appearances, the AP national title in 2003. I know LSU fans are going to say that doesn't mean anything. But still, Pete Carroll was the author of a dynasty at one of college football's most famous, tradition-rich programs, and you're just going to exclude him from the Hall of Fame because, well, you had to coach 10 seasons and you coached only 9. So just absolute idiocy. And the College Football Hall of Fame just, continues to not get the point.
I mean, Pete Carroll and Howard Schnellenberger and a few of these other coaches that you've listed, they're not in the Hall of Fame, but moron Dennis Franchione is. Oh, my God. His first season at Texas A&M, they got destroyed 77-0 by Oklahoma after leaving Alabama to go deal with the NCAA. Oh, my God. That's nuts. That is nuts.
Yeah, and really, any Hall of Fame has to say, well, if Coach A, that coach is in, then you have to have this other coach in. So that just proves the point right there. That if you have Dennis Franchione in, you have to have Pete Carroll and Howard Schnellenberger in. I mean, That is just dumb with a capital D.
Oh yeah, with 4 exclamation points behind it. Like I mean, it's like don't even recommend Franchione to the Hall of Fame. Like I wouldn't even recommend him to be the Hall of Fame to be a janitor. I wouldn't recommend him be a janitor. No.
Yeah. And I see on the screen you have Joe Tiller. Like Joe Tiller got Purdue to the Rose Bowl. Like have the past 20, 25 years taught us how hard life is for Purdue most of the time? So if you're taking Purdue to the Rose Bowl, and if you made Wyoming into a consistent annual winner in the Mountain West, you need to be in the College Football Hall of Fame. So once again, we're going to penalize coaches because they took on tough jobs where it was not as easy to accumulate the a certain winning percentage. Just absolute idiocy.
Man, and it's like he's been dead for almost a decade and he's not in the Hall of Fame. That's insane. That is completely insane. Like there was a time when I watched Purdue football as a little boy, and I couldn't really think of Purdue football without Joe Tiller, to be honest.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean that dude was a winner. He was a winner. I mean, he made sure Purdue held its own against Notre Dame when they played each other.
Well, I mean, hey, the guy who developed Drew Brees, like I think that guy deserves a pretty large place in the pantheon in terms of great football coaches and teachers of the passing game.
There you go. I mean, it's like I'll never forget that last game they coached, Purdue, Indiana in 08. That was a pretty good one right there by Purdue. Johnny Majors. Oh, really?
Yeah, that's another one. Yep.
That's insane. Reason,
right?
I mean, it's like he got Pitt a natty. He got Tennessee winning. And here's my favorite reason. Phil Fulmer screwed him over. That alone should put you in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Like, he's too old. I should have the jump. Like, no, Phil Fulmer. You shouldn't. Get the hell out of here.
A little palace coup in the early 90s, absolutely. But let's just trace back with Johnny Majors. Like as you said, he got Pitt a national championship. Pitt, like not one of the blue bloods, right? Not one of the household names. He won a national championship with Pitt. And then, all right, he wasn't the second coming of Christ at Tennessee, but he was really, really good. All right, multiple SEC championships, multiple Sugar Bowl wins, and Tennessee was a consistent winner. Like, come on, like what are we trying to deprive the man of? But of course, because of that bean counting rule, the winning percentage, and just remember, Johnny Majors came back to Pitt a second time after he got kicked out by Phil Fulmer at Tennessee. And Pitt was not in good shape in the 1990s when Johnny Majors went back there. That tenure at Pitt, that second go-around, is what lowered the winning percentage to make him ineligible. So, he had a Hall of Fame resume when Phil Fulmer, pushed him out at Tennessee. Are we going to say, oh, you took on another job that was not in good shape, you lost some games, so wait, suddenly you're not a Hall of Famer? Like, just think about that. That just makes absolutely no sense, and that's why the College Football Hall of Fame policy on this is just absolute BS.
Oof. Rich Brooks. I mean, dude, literally, like you say, there is no Oregon football without Rich Brooks. There's no Bellotti, Chip Kelly, Lanning, no 2020's awesomeness, no Oregon to the Big Ten without Rich Brooks.
Totally. Like that's where it all began. That, everything good from that in Oregon football today flows back to Rich Brooks and the 1994 Pac-10 championship team that played Kajana Carter, Kerry Collins, and the rest of Penn State in the 1995 Rose Bowl. It all traces back to that. Yep, because there was a game, Oregon State, 1983. The game finished in a scoreless tie. And that game, when Oregon State and Oregon were both at rock bottom, that game was nicknamed the Toilet Bowl. Just double zeros. Remember the West Virginia Wake Forest scoreless tie? Woof.
Oh yeah, where Frank
So
Beamer, Virginia
Frank
Tech
Beamer, yeah,
celebrating. Oh man, he's
exactly.
like, yeah,
So
yeah. It's like,
so back in 1983, we had the similar game, the Toilet Bowl, Oregon and Oregon State. Both teams were absolutely horrid in the 1980s. So like Rich Brooks had absolutely nothing. So this was a long-term build. Like there was no debate about this. There was no ambiguity. This was just going to be a long-term deal. Someone was going to have to be patient enough to work with the Oregon program and eventually build it into a winner. Like this was before Phil Knight became a billionaire, right? This was before Nike became the globally dominant force it is. So Rich Brooks, he did that at Oregon, and he was really good at Kentucky. Like he has a similar track record to what Mark Stoops did at Kentucky, but he did it earlier, punching above his weight. So, Rich Brooks lost a ton at Oregon in the 1980s before he built the Ducks into an elite program that Mike Bellotti then took to the next level, and then Chip Kelly, Dan Lanning have taken it to the top since then. You have to have Rich Brooks in the College Football Hall of Fame, and once again, Jackson, if Dennis Franchione's in, you have to have Rich Brooks in, no question.
I mean, how do you not have Rich Brooks in? That's
Seriously.
nuts.
Seriously.
There's no Oregon football without Rich Brooks. It's asinine, completely asinine.
That's right. Cool. Now, just on a historical note, Oregon did have good coaches before Rich Brooks, but long before Rich Brooks. Len Casanova was a really good coach for Oregon in the 1950s, and like John McKay, who won 4 national championships at USC, he left Len Casanova's staff at Oregon to be the head coach of USC. So there have been some great Oregon head coaches, but none in the years immediately preceding Rich Brooks. So I want to note that for the record.
There we go. And Chip Kelly, I've been thinking about this one. He did win at Oregon, but UCLA he didn't do so hot there, which I don't really know if that speaks more about him, but I feel like it speaks more about the UCLA athletic department.
Chip Kelly needed some time at UCLA. One thing that helped Chip Kelly do well later in his UCLA tenure, before the 2020s, basically before COVID, you didn't have 5 years of eligibility, which is now commonplace. You get that extra year of COVID eligibility. So Chip Kelly was able to spend year after year after year with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And it was in that 5th year for Dorian Thompson-Robinson that UCLA put together the really good season in 2022, came 1 win short of making the Pac-12 championship game. So that really helped Chip Kelly there. But you know what? Even if you say accurately that UCLA was mediocre under Chip Kelly, he still for 4 years at Oregon, he was a giant. Like yes. Oregon was a juggernaut. Oregon was a superpower for 4 years. And so you go back to other coaches in the Hall of Fame for doing far less than Chip Kelly did. And people will say, well, it was just 4 years. But okay, 4 years of 4 years of being, a top 5 program. That is more than what many other coaches in the College Football Hall of Fame have achieved. I mean, so this is another thing that people need to realize. You can be skeptical of saying, well, Chip Kelly was just 4 years that had just 4 great years. Is that really enough to be in the Hall of Fame? That's a good question. Like, that's a reasonable question. But you have to look at everyone else who's in the College Football Hall of Fame. And I've looked at the list. There are several coaches who haven't done a fraction of what Chip Kelly did. Not a fraction. So, like they might have the 600 winning percentage and they might have spent at least 10 seasons in the sport. So they technically qualify, but they don't have anything close. I'm not saying most coaches, I'm just saying several, right? And Dennis Franchione really is a good representative example of that. If you have Francione in, you have to have Chip Kelly in. Like Dennis Francione strikes me as like he's the bottom of the Hall of Fame. Like he's the low bar. If you have him in, you have to have these other guys in.
Oh yeah. And what's funny though is like Halloween 09, Chip Kelly basically helped Oregon snap the Pac-12 domination away from USC from Pete Carroll. But now Pete Carroll is head coach of the Raiders and Chip Kelly's the offensive coordinator 2 years later. I don't think they thought on Halloween 09 they'd be coached together on the sidelines.
I don't think at any point until just this past year did they think that they would be coaching together. That's going to be amazing to follow. And of course, since I'm the editor of TrojansWire and UCLA Wire, I get to blog about that, right? I get to blog about Pete Carroll. I get to blog about Chip Kelly. It's going to be fun with the Raiders for sure this season. All right, so you've brought up June Jones. So, okay, June Jones got Hawaii to a BCS Bowl. He took Hawaii to the Sugar Bowl. Now, of course, Hawaii got ragdolled and just absolutely obliterated by Georgia. Okay, but still, Hawaii, just the fact that Hawaii was playing in that game. Hawaii. Let me say it again. Hawaii in the Sugar Bowl. I mean, do we realize how absolutely flipping incredible that is? Just to do that. Forget about anything else. But of course, June Jones won for several seasons at Hawaii, and then he resurrects the SMU football program from the death penalty. He wins a bowl game there. He made SMU into a solid winner. So, like, he takes these schools that had no right to succeed at a high level, and he won big at each place. You know, to be a big-time winner at Hawaii and SMU, like, if that's not worthy of the Hall of Fame, what is? Right? And this is another point to underscore. If you look through the roster of College Football Hall of Fame coaches, you know, they're not all the General Nealons and the coaches at, the most famous SEC Big Ten schools. They have Division II coaches. They have Division III coaches. So it's various levels of college football. And so if you do what June Jones did at SMU and Hawaii, like, of course you're a Hall of Famer, measured against everyone else. So just another ridiculous exclusion.
Ooh, Pat Hill. Oh man, he was fantastic at Fresno State. How do you not have that guy in?
Yeah, so he was really good for a really long time, which in many ways is just kind of the most basic version of, what qualifies someone to be in the Hall of Fame. Like, if you were really darn good for a really long time, which Pat Hill was, like, that should be it. And of course, as a USC blogger, that 2005 game, the one with Reggie Bush making that great crossfield run, the run that sealed the Heisman Trophy, like, Fresno State fought USC inch for inch throughout that game and made it tough for one of the great USC teams of all time. And what Fresno State did under Pat Hill, like, that gave Fresno State the foundation as a program to continue what it did under Jeff Tedford and other recent coaches. Kalen DeBoer coached at Fresno State. That's the foundation laid by Pat Hill in a manner similar to what Rich Brooks did at Oregon, laying the foundation for his successors, Bellotti, Kelly, Cristobal, Lanning. So Pat Hill, like what he did at Fresno State, to me, if you have other coaches in the Hall, you have to have Pat Hill in the Hall as well.
Oof. Like Jim Donnan in the Hall of Fame? That's
so here we go. Like, this explains my point, right? If you have Jim Donnan in, and like, he was awesome at Marshall. Don't get me wrong. He was awesome at Marshall. Like, he wasn't great at Georgia. I mean, he's not going in the Hall of Fame for what he did at Georgia. He's in the Hall of Fame for what he did at Marshall. And that's fair. Like, I don't object to having Jim Donnan in the Hall of Fame for what he did at one school. That's fine, because he did crush it at Marshall. But if you have Jim Donnan in at Marshall, then you have to have Pat Hill in for Fresno State. You have to have Joe Tiller at Purdue and Wyoming. You have to have June Jones at SMU and Hawaii. You have to have Rich Brooks at Oregon, Kentucky. Really makes my point. And there are a couple other coaches there, Jack Mollenkoff at Purdue in the 60s. That's kind of like a Joe Tiller comparison. But really, I think Jim Donnan is the best example there. That if you're going to put someone in the Hall of Fame for what he did at Marshall, then you have to be including guys who did well at Purdue, who did well at SMU in Hawaii, who did well at Fresno State. That just is the simplest point I can make.
Oh, man, that's just completely nuts that Mollenkoff isn't there. I mean, it's like, bro had Purdue in the top 2. Like, he had Purdue in a 1-2 matchup in 67. That's nuts.
Yeah. So he's in, but like Joe Tiller not being in, that's the thing. Like, if you have Mollenkoff in, you should have Tiller in. That's the thing. Yeah. So just to be clear, and I've spoken to Jim Donnan a few times. Great guy. Like, I don't have a problem with Jim Donnan being in because he was absolutely awesome at Marshall. Again, I think that's fine. If you do an absolutely amazing job at one school, yeah, you're Hall of Fame because you were amazing. Like, you set the bar really high. But if you have a Jim Donnan in for Marshall, you have to have Pat Hale at Fresno. You have to have Jim Jones for SMU and Hawaii, et cetera, on down the line.
Oh, yeah. And there's definitely going to be plenty of more honorable mentions that are not in yet. But there's a few dishonorable mentions that are in the Hall of Fame when they really shouldn't be. And it just kind of makes me feel like some of these voters in the Hall of Fame, I don't feel like they're researching all of college football. Like, it just kind of makes me feel.
Well, just let's emphasize this. It's the policy, right? It's the policy. It shouldn't be that you have to have a .595 winning percentage. Like, Howard Schnellenberger doesn't have a .595 winning percentage, but we all know he had to lose a ton of ball games to build the programs that he did at Miami, Louisville, and FAU. So, like, just use some common frickin' sense and get rid of these arbitrary rules. Pete Carroll didn't coach 10 years. All right. We know he's worthy of the College Football Hall of Fame. Just get rid of that 10-year rule. It's the rules, it's the policies that are holding this thing back. They need to get rid of these arbitrary bean counter type, guardrails. Just stupid.
It's completely insane. But I will say, as of filming on June 11th, 2025, we are getting closer to week 0, 73 days until week 0. But as this episode that you're watching on June 12th of 2025 is 72 days until week 0, 77 days until week 1, 78 days till Auburn, Baylor, Georgia Tech, Colorado, 79 days till week 1 Saturday, 80 days till Notre Dame, Miami. Shane Beamer going up against his dad's former team, Virginia Tech, in the South Carolina-Virginia Tech matchup, and the start of the Bill Belichick era between North Carolina and TCU, 81 days until Labor Day. There we go. We're getting things right.
Can't wait, baby.
There we go. I mean, the countdown got smaller, and it's going to continue to get smaller. Well, Matt, for those who don't know about you, let's tell the people what you got going on this week.
Well, so, I'm at TrojansWire, I'm at UCLA Wire, I'm at College Sports Wire. I'm on the team at the Voice of College Football. I do a USC live show with my co-host, Ethan Inman. And by the way, that we've been doing it on Wednesdays, but now we're moving it to Thursdays, and we're taking calls from listeners. That's Thursdays at 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific, starting June 12th. And we'll be doing it Thursdays during the summer. So join me and Ethan Inman, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. So and a reminder, the Voice of College Football website, vocfb.com. What we're doing during the summer is we have 28 shows, 28 schools, I should say, 28 schools that have their own shows at the Voice of College Football. Now, Jackson has his Alabama show. You can see it there for Alabama. There we go. So you can get the link to Jackson's most recent episode. We're going to continue to post each new show as it comes aboard. We're going to be posting these shows on the website, vocfb.com. So you can just enjoy these broadcasts. You can get to know, if you don't already listen to these team shows, get to know the hosts. Get to know people like Jackson Johnson at the Alabama show, at the Voice of College Football. Get to know all the hosts. There you see the roster of hosts. So you can listen to all these shows, prominent schools across the country. That's going to be what we're going to be doing during the summer. And then, of course, in the fall, when we get into game coverage, we'll be writing articles on all the big games, covering all the big stories. So vocfb.com, the new Voice of College Football website. Just listen to these shows that we're going to be posting throughout the summer. vocfb.com.
There we go. And we got Lucas Hill, who's debuted South Carolina Live this week, the first edition. And there we go. That's exciting. And there's going to be a few more shows coming your way. And as I always say on Alabama with the Voice College Football, if your favorite team channel is not there on this website, don't worry. We're getting it added. We promise you that. And we've got some host candidates planned for you, and you're going to enjoy them. That I can personally guarantee. But don't you worry. There's going to be more Big 12 teams, more ACC teams. We promise you that. And there's the forum.
We're building our staff. We're building our team at the Voice of College Football.
Oh, yeah. We're getting it rocking and rolling. And of course, Matt's getting things rocking and rolling not only on the Voice of College Football and on USC at the Voice of College Football, but on TrojansWire and on Patreon, where he's got some magic all over the place, and he's on UCLA Wire and College Wire. Gotta say, it's one of the busiest men I've ever been around, that's for sure.
Takes one to know one, Jackson. You're the hardest working man in college football show business, that's for sure.
Oh, man. I remember, like, Mark said, where it was, like, on March 30th, 2024, on the State of the Voice College Football dress, he's like, I never like being called the hardest working man because, like, that means I got to make a few changes. Like, oh, man, like, that was so funny. It was so hilarious. Oh. But, you can check me out on the 16th edition of Alabama Primetime Live, where I subbed in for Manny Wilson, where I discussed with Coach Smoot about some recruiting updates in all of college football for the Alabama Crimson Tide. And it was a fun one. It was a fun episode. We had so much fun. And we talked a little bit about our take on what Nick Kelly from AL.com believes are the biggest trap games for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Spoiler alert. We disagreed with it, but we won't tell any more than that. And then there's the 41st edition of Crimson Tide Live, where it's 82 days till kickoff. Coach Burtz and I had a lot of fun talking about our take on the Crimson Tide, including Ryan Williams, hanging out with the 2020 Heisman winner himself, Devontae Smith. And we talked a little bit about Joel Klatt giving his take on Alabama, Tennessee, and how it could affect Coach Caleb DeBoer. And, of course, we've got an upcoming interview releasing on Alabama with the Voice College Football, where it's with Coach Mark Hudspeth, who is winning quite a lot at Louisiana Lafayette in the 2010s. NCAA may have taken some of those wins away, but they're not taking the wins away from here or here or here. And, of course, there's the 36th edition of the Alabama Call-In Show, where Jeffrey is back from vacation. And on Thursday nights, Jeffrey and I take your calls on the Crimson Tide, 9 p.m. Central Time, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And, of course, you can check me out on Jackson Johnson 979, where I collaborate with my buddy Will and D, Sports Talk with Austin, and I've got numerous episodes of the Jacksonian, including the 73rd edition of this episode. 27 more are coming your way. You won't want to miss it. Thank you for helping me get to 675 subs. Now 325 subs away from that magic number 1,000. Definitely need all the help I can get to there. But, of course, if you want to hear what I've got to say on Alabama with the Voice of College Football, check me out on Alabama VOCFB on YouTube, where we are 385 subs away from 3,000. We're catching up to the Texas channel. I mean, Texas may have been the last SEC team in the playoffs, but they're not Bama. But if you want to hear more updates on Alabama with the Voice of College Football or the Jacksonian or my once-week calls on the Paul Feinbaum Show, where the weekends are full of surprises, check me out on Jackson BOCFB on /Twitter, Instagram, Threads, Jackson Johnson 543908. But if some of you don't like X or Instagram, check me on Blue Sky at Jackson Johnson 97 Blue Sky Social, where friend of the show, Mike Debate, says where the skies are blue. Some say the skies are overcast. Some say the skies are gray on Blue Sky. But we can promise you on all these links that I'm on, you can find magic everywhere. And with that being said, like, comment, subscribe, click on the notification bell so you never miss another video or another episode whatsoever. And we will see you soon. Good night, everybody.